Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Pucan, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. Today we talk about an interesting topic, Freemasonry. And it's going to be quite a long introduction. We're going to cover the different traditions, the practices, the beliefs, a bit of the history. So it's going to be a full-on overview of Freemasonry. So really everything that you need to know about Freemasonry, hopefully. But if there is anything that I'm missing out, you will let me know in the comments. Freemasonry, as the oldest and most widespread initiatory society in the Western world that is not dependent on a religious institution, represents a complex phenomenon situated at the crossroads of religion, ritual, morality, and esotericism. It originated in the transition from operative stonemason guilds to a speculative philosophical system that became formalized in the early 18th century. Today, it continues to function as a fraternal organization that combines moral instruction with esoteric symbolism, ceremonial ritual, and a semi-structured socio-political presence. To fully appreciate the nature of Freemasonry, we must approach it not as a static institution, but as a historically adaptive system that has been reinterpreted across centuries, geographies, and cultural milieus. Although its modern incarnation dates from the early 1700s, Freemasonry's ideological roots reach back to the medieval guilds of free stonemasons, craftsmen skilled in shaping fine-grained limestone used in ecclesiastical and monumental architecture. These artisans, referred to as Freemasons, were highly trained and often peripatetic, and it is from among their ranks that the earliest lodges likely emerged. The Shaw Statutes of 1598 and 1599 in Scotland provide some of the earliest extant documentary evidence of such lodges engaging in regulatory, educational, and possibly initiatory practices, predating the formation of the first Grand Lodge by over a century. However, Freemasonry, as we understand it today, developed most decisively in the early 18th century England. In 1717, four London lodges convened to form what would become known as the Premier Grand Lodge of England. This body catalyzed the process of institutionalization, codifying the rituals, restructuring the administrative framework, and projecting a new identity that catered not to working Masons, but to the emerging class of the educated gentlemen. The adoption of this gentleman's club model marked a fundamental shift. Freemasonry was no longer a guild-like association of craftsmen, but a speculative, moral, and philosophical fraternity open to those of social standing who desired personal refinement through allegorical initiation and symbolic instruction. The lodge, the primary unit of Masonic organization, was both an initiatory space and a moral microcosm. Within it, members progressed through degrees, entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason, each of which contained a blend of narrative allegory, architectural symbolism, and moral instruction. These initiations were performative and theatrical in nature, designed to imprint moral and philosophical insights through participatory ritual drama. As Mackey emphasized in his seminal work on Masonic symbolism, the Freemason is taught primarily through legends and symbols. These are not regarded as historical truths, but as vehicles for conveying esoteric knowledge and ethical doctrines. The symbolic language of Freemasonry operates on multiple levels. The square becomes a representation of virtue, the compass of spiritual boundaries, and the temple a model of the inner self to be perfected through moral labor. Freemasonry's success and enduring appeal lie in its unique combination of ritual, sociability, secrecy, and moral aspiration. It constructs a mythic and symbolic world in which the initiate undergoes transformation, not merely as a social member, but as a participant in a sacred drama of moral evolution. It also presents itself as ecumenical in orientation. The earliest constitutions, notably James Anderson's 1723 edition, positioned Freemasonry as an institution that transcended religious and political divisions, seeking to unite men of differing faiths and creeds under a shared moral banner. Today, Freemasonry is a global movement boasting millions of members across continents, with practices that vary widely yet remain recognizably coherent. From regular Anglo-American lodges adhering to strict theological requirements to liberal continental obediences that embrace secularism and gender inclusivity, the Masonic tradition continues to evolve. As Bogdan and Snook observe, the resilience and adaptability of Freemasonry as a cultural system lie in its ability to reconfigure its outer expressions while maintaining a symbolic and ritualistic core that speaks to enduring human concerns: identity, morality, fraternity, and transcendence. Thus, to study Freemasonry is to engage with a ritual system that operates simultaneously as a moral philosophy, an esoteric tradition, a performative community, and a symbolic mode of self cultivation. It is precisely this multifaceted nature that makes Freemasonry such a fertile object of academic inquiry within the fields of religious studies, anthropology of religion, and Western esotericism. Before we dive even deeper into our topic, I'd like to remind you that if you enjoy my content and you want to help make education free for everybody, you can help keep this project alive. As you know, this project is pretty much crowdfunded by you guys. So if you have the means and want to support me, I would massively appreciate it if you consider supporting me on Patreon, Coffee, on YouTube memberships. You can super thank me in the comments. You can check out my services at drangelapuca.com. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter so that you stay in touch with me besides social media. And yeah, all the links are in bio, in the info box, everywhere. I would highly recommend joining my Patreon community because it's a growing and fantastic community that I'm very proud of. We have monthly lectures, a book club, a Discord server. You can have one-to-one conversations with me, really depending on the chosen tier. You can access different perks, but I think the best one is to, well, hopefully to support my work and to encounter like-minded and academically inclined, spiritually interested people, which are all part of my community, and I'm very proud of each and every one of them. So thank you all for considering, and back to our topic on Freemasonry now. The historical development of Freemasonry reflects the organization's complex evolution from a network of medieval craft guilds into a multifaceted global phenomenon. While scholars have previously attempted to trace Freemasonry to ancient mystery cults or Templar survivals, the more historically grounded consensus locates its emergence in early modern Britain, with operative Mason guilds as a plausible route and the transition to speculative Freemasonry occurring gradually in the 17th and 18th century. The transition from operative to speculative Masonry was marked by a key development: the increasing admission of non-operative members, gentlemen with no ties to the building trades, into Masonic lodges. This phenomenon, known as the acceptance of non-operatives, was well documented in Scotland by the early 17th century and likely occurred independently in England. Lodges such as those at Kilwinning and Edinburgh were already engaged in formalized ritual activity, even issuing internal statutes that regulated member conduct, obligations, and meeting protocols. These proto-Masonic lodges eventually evolved into centers of speculative thought, adopting ritual elements that transcended their practical origins and embraced a moral philosophical framework. The most pivotal institutional moment in Freemasonry's history occurred in London in 1717, when four lodges met at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern and formed what would become the premier Grand Lodge of England. This marked the beginning of modern Freemasonry as an organized transnational fraternity. Notably, the shift was not merely administrative. It also involved a conscious reframing of the lodge's function. No longer a space for regulating building craft, the lodge became an arena for moral improvement, enlightenment values, and symbolic initiation. This newly centralized form of Freemasonry, dubbed the Moderns, faced immediate competition. In the mid 18th century, a rival Grand Lodge emerged that claimed to preserve the original unaltered rituals and practices. Known as the Ancients, this group criticized the Moderns for innovation and ritual degradation. Though initially composed largely of Irish Freemasons residing in London, the Ancients soon attracted widespread support and institutional legitimacy. The schism culminated in a unification in 1813 with the creation of the United Grand Lodge of England. Yet, as Berman carefully documents, this was not merely a reconciliation but a negotiated synthesis that absorbed elements from both traditions while marginalizing other practices, such as those of the Harrodim or the Grand Lodge of All England at York. Parallel developments unfolded on the European continent. Freemasonry was introduced to France in the late 1720s, where it rapidly transformed. The French Masonic milieu exhibited a strong receptivity to symbolic elaboration and esoteric speculation, giving rise to a rich array of high degree systems, often involving mystical elements. The translation and creative reinterpretation of English rituals into French produced an increasingly allegorical and ornate Masonic culture, one which would spread rapidly through elite networks across Europe, particularly in Catholic and monarchic contexts where secrecy offered both appeal and protection. Colonial expansion played a crucial role in globalizing Freemasonry. British military and trading expeditions brought Freemasonry to North America, the Caribbean, India, and Africa, often through the establishment of military lodges that initiated both officers and local elites. Jessica Harland Jacobs has demonstrated how these lodges functioned as imperial nodes, transmitting both British sociability and Masonic identity to colonial settings. Yet, this global spread was not just a one way imposition. Freemasonry frequently adapted to local contexts, incorporating indigenous elites and reflecting regional sociopolitical concerns. A telling example is the role Freemasonry played in the Hawaiian Kingdom, where it was adopted by members of the Ali'i, the royalty, as part of their strategy of selective modernization and diplomatic positioning vis-à-vis colonial powers. Moreover, the 19th century witnessed the institutional diversification of Freemasonry into myriad obediences and rites. In England and the United States, regular Masonry maintained its adherence to the three-degree system and the requirement for belief in a supreme being. On the continent, particularly in France and Italy, more liberal currents emerged, often associated with anti clericalism, nationalism, and even revolutionary activism. The Grand Orion de France's decision in 1877 to remove the requirement for belief in God created a definitive rupture with Anglo-American Masonic bodies and led to the crystallization of competing regular and liberal Masonic words. Finally, the question of gender and inclusion became increasingly pressing. While women had been ritually initiated in adoption lodges since at least 1744, these remained marginalized within broader Masonic networks and were often viewed as symbolic or decorative. By the early 20th century, however, mixed orders such as Les Droits Humains emerged, offering full ritual participation for women and men alike and gaining traction in France, Italy, and later elsewhere. As Snook argues, the history of the adoption rite and subsequent women's masonry reveals a significant yet understudied strand of Masonic history that complicates narratives of strict patriarchal exclusivity. So, the historical development of Freemasonry cannot be reduced to a linear progression from guild to fraternity. Rather, it is better understood as a web of ritual innovation, institutional schism, and global adaptation. Its capacity to reframe itself according to shifting religious, political, and cultural context is perhaps its most enduring characteristic. Now let's look at the major traditions of Freemasonry. We have seen the multifaceted history of Freemasonry and the fact that it has produced a wide variety of institutional forms and ritual practices, which resulted in what scholars have come to classify as distinct Masonic traditions or families. These traditions differ not only in ritual content, but also in their theological assumptions, organizational structure, political engagements, and views on gender. Understanding these divergent streams is essential for grasping the contemporary complexity of Freemasonry as a global initiatory phenomenon. One of the most prominent distinctions is that between what is often termed regular and liberal Freemasonry. Regular Freemasonry, typified by the United Grand Lodge of England and its allied Grand Lodges, especially in the United States and Commonwealth countries, adheres to a set of principles often described as the ancient landmarks. These include the requirement of belief in a supreme being, the exclusion of political and religious discussion within the lodge, and the barring of women from initiation. The UGLE also refuses recognition to bodies that do not meet these standards, creating a closed network of mutual recognition among regular Grand Lodges. In contrast, liberal Freemasonry, sometimes referred to as Continental Freemasonry, is more inclusive and pluralistic in its orientation. The Grand Orient de France, for example, removed the requirement for belief in God in 1877, emphasizing instead humanistic and secular values. This decision resulted in a rupture with the UGLE and the emergence of a dual Masonic world divided by questions of doctrine and inclusion. Liberal Masonic bodies often admit women, permit open discussion of religion and politics, and engage directly with progressive causes. They are frequently linked with Enlightenment and revolutionary ideals, as well as with anti clerical movements, particularly in France, Italy, and Latin America. The ritual content of these traditions also diverges. Regular Freemasonry typically employs a three-degree system: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason, rooted in early 18th century English sources. These rituals are generally conservative, retaining older forms with limited embellishment. Liberal and especially high-degree systems, by contrast, have developed expansive ritual hierarchies. The Scottish Rite, for example, comprises 33 degrees and incorporates narratives from biblical, Templar, alchemical, and chivalric traditions. The French Rite and the rectified Scottish Rite represent further elaborations of the core degrees, with varying emphasis on mystical, moral, and philosophical teachings. Gender is a central axis along which Masonic traditions differ. While regular Freemasonry excludes women entirely, liberal Freemasonry includes both mixed and women-only obediences. The most historically significant example of female inclusion is the adoption rite, which emerged in France by the mid-18th century. Initially dependent on male lodges, adoption lodges developed rituals parallel to the male degrees but tailored to women and often focused on feminine virtue, maternal symbolism, and biblical heroines such as Judith and Esther. Over time, some adoption lodges became autonomous, eventually giving rise to modern women's Grand Lodges, such as the Grand Loge Féminine de France. These bodies now operate independently and have contributed to the development of distinct ritual forms grounded in feminine archetypes and initiatory themes. Mixed gender traditions also deserve attention. Le Droit Humain, founded in France in 1893, was the first international co-Masonic order and has grown to include members on every continent. It adopts a form of the Scottish Rite, is inclusive of women, and espouses a universalist ideology that transcends national and religious divisions. It has also historically attracted theosophists, spiritualists, and other esoteric thinkers, which further diversified its ideological profile. Beyond these major divisions, smaller and often more esoterically inclined traditions persist. The Swedish Rite, practiced in Scandinavia, is explicitly Christian and admits only Trinitarian Christians. Its rituals are structured around 10 degrees and deeply imbued with theological content. The Memphis Mizraim Rite, associated with occultist and theurgical elements, incorporates Egyptian, Kabbalistic, and Hermetic symbolism, and reflects the 19th century fascination with ancient mystery religions and magical revivalism. Furthermore, the relationship between Freemasonry and political movements has varied considerably across traditions and national contexts. In Catholic countries, liberal Freemasonry has often aligned with Republican and secular causes, frequently in opposition to clerical and monarchist forces. In contrast, regular Freemasonry in Anglo-American context has tended to espouse political neutrality and civic respectability, integrating itself into national establishments rather than opposing them. These divergent traditions, regular, liberal, mixed gender, high degree, national, and esoteric, do not simply coexist, but often interact, influence, and contest each other. They form what Johann Sneck describes as families of rituals, each with its own historical logic, symbolic vocabulary, and initiatory theory. This diversity is not a sign of fragmentation, but of Freemasonry's extraordinary adaptability and its capacity to articulate ritualized identity in dialogue with changing cultural, theological, and political conditions. Now that let's cover the spicy side, the ritual practices. So at the heart of Freemasonry lies a highly structured ritual system through which initiates are gradually inducted into the symbolic and moral world of the fraternity. These rituals serve not only as rites of passage, but also as mechanisms of moral formation, social bonding, and esoteric transmission. Far from being static liturgies, Masonic rituals have evolved across time and space and show the shifting theological, cultural, and political context in which Freemasonry has operated. Freemasonic initiation rituals are structured in degrees, with the foundational system consisting of three: entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. Each degree involves a progressive deepening of symbolic knowledge, with dramatic performances that are carefully choreographed and steeped in allegory. The structure of these ceremonies often includes a preparatory stage, which may involve symbolic darkness or disorientation, a central narrative or ordeal, frequently modeled on biblical or mythical exempla, and a moment of enlightenment or rebirth, symbolized by the reception of light or the revelation of a symbolic word. The initiation is inherently performative. As William Moore has argued in his study of Masonic architecture and spatial symbolism, the lodge room itself functions as a ritual theater, a sacred space meticulously arranged to facilitate symbolic transformation. From the twin pillars, Jachin and Boaz, flanking the entrance, to the checkered flooring representing moral dualism, each element reinforces the cosmological and ethical themes enacted in the ritual. The use of tools such as the square, compasses, and trowel extends the metaphorical framework, mapping stone masonry's operative vocabulary onto a spiritual or ethical edifice. Initiation rituals are more than symbolic pageantry. They constitute a form of embodied knowledge. As Sneck has observed in his analysis of adoption rite rituals for women, Masonic initiation engages the body, voice, and senses of the initiate in ways that resonate with anthropological models of ritual efficacy. The candidate is blindfolded, led through a sequence of spatial transitions made to assume specific bodily postures, and is subject to verbal formulas that convey both exclusion and welcome. These actions mirror what Victor Turner termed liminality, a threshold state in which the initiate undergoes symbolic death and rebirth. The content of the rituals, while ostensibly moral, is often laced with esoteric motifs. The Hiramic legend central to the Master Mason degree recounts the death and resurrection of Hiram Abif, a mythic architect of Solomon's Temple. This narrative is widely interpreted within Masonic and esoteric literature as an allegory of spiritual transformation, akin to mystery cult initiations or even hermetic rebirth. The ritual logic of concealment, loss, and rediscovery of the Master's word functions not merely as a moral allegory, but also as an initiatic drama of gnosis. Ritual forms have not remained uniform across time. The historical development of Masonic rituals has involved a continuous negotiation between innovation and tradition. As Snake has demonstrated, even among the relatively marginalized adoption lodges, rituals evolved in response to changing gender norms and institutional priorities. Rituals from the 1740s underscored gendered virtue and maternal symbolism, while those from the 20th century incorporated elements of autonomy and parity with male rights, which shows broader shifts in women's social roles and Masonic identity. The role of dance and movement within ritual has also attracted scholarly attention. As examined in Dance Traces Surviving in the Ritual of Freemasonry, choreographic elements, particularly circular movements and chain of union gestures, have been retained in many rites. These bodily configurations are not decorative but integral to the transmission of ritual meaning. They evoke communal harmony, cosmic order, and the ritual regeneration of time and space. The persistence of such embodied symbolism shows the initiatory process as a totalizing experience, engaging the physical, emotional, and cognitive dimensions of the initiate. While mainstream rituals are often marked by restraint and moral allegory, fringe Masonic systems have embraced more overtly esoteric and magical frameworks. High degree rites, such as those found in the Rite of Memphis Mizraim or the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, some of whose founders were also Masons, incorporate alchemical, Kabbalistic, and theological elements. Though often viewed with suspicions by Grand Lodges, these rituals illuminate the esoteric potential latent within Freemasonry's symbolic corpus. The multiplicity of ritual forms across genders, traditions, and degrees reflects Freemasonry's adaptability and its enduring investment in initiation as a transformative symbolic act. Through these rituals, Masonry constructs a world in which identity is forged not by birth or belief, but by passage through a set of carefully choreographed experiences that reorient the initiate toward moral, social, and spiritual ideals. Now let's cover magic practices in Freemasonry because I know that a lot of you will be interested in that. While mainstream Masonic institutions often distance themselves from overt associations with magic, the historical and symbolic entanglement between Freemasonry and magical traditions are both substantial and complex. Magic, understood here in the anthropological and esoteric sense as ritualized action intended to affect spiritual or material realities through symbolic means, intersect with Freemasonry at several levels, symbolically, ritually, and ideologically. Despite the insistence of many contemporary Grand Lodges that Freemasonry is not a magical society, its ritual structure, use of esoteric symbolism, and links to broader currents in Western occultism suggest otherwise, at least in terms of historical influence and reception. The Masonic ritual system, particularly in its higher degrees, draws on a repertoire of tropes shared with magical and hermetic traditions. The loss and recovery of sacred knowledge, the use of veiled language and numerical symbolism, the construction of sacred space, and the invocation of transformative power through ritual drama. These features align closely with the logic of Western magical orders, which similarly rely on the initiatory performance of symbolic death and rebirth to induce ontological change in the practitioner. One of the clearest examples of magical logic within Freemasonry is the legend of the lost word in the Master Mason degree. The concealment and rediscovery of this ineffable word not only evokes Kabbalistic notions of divine names, but also operates as a mythic cipher through which esoteric knowledge is allegorized and ritually encrypted. As Mackey notes, the recovery of the word is emblematic of the search for truth and spiritual illumination, a motif that resonates strongly with both Gnostic and magical worldviews. The very act of transmitting secret words, grips, and signs within a closed initiatory framework is fundamentally magical in character, functioning as a controlled ritual system for the distribution of sacred knowledge. The structure and function of tracing boards used to teach moral and symbolic lessons to initiates further reveal magical undercurrents. These boards are not just didactic devices, but complex visual diagrams that organize Masonic cosmology in spatial and symbolic terms. In this sense, they operate analogously to talismanic and geomantic charts, mapping the lodge's microcosmic reality onto an esoteric metaphysical order. As discussed in Dense Traces Surviving in the Ritual of Freemasonry, the choreographic movements of Masons during initiation, such as circumambulation and the chain of union, form a kinetic embodiment of magical and cosmological ideas, which reinforces the idea that Masonic ritual is not simply representational, but performative and potentially transformative. Beyond symbolic and ritual parallels, Freemasonry has historically intersected with explicit magical currents. The Rite of Memphis Mizraim, for example, developed in the 19th century from the confluence of Masonic, Theosophical, and Hermetic streams. Its rituals include references to ancient Egyptian deities, planetary intelligences, and alchemical transformation. Figures such as Giuseppe Balsamo, also known as Cagliostro, a prominent 18th century occultist, blended Masonic initiation with magical operations, alchemical lore, and healing rituals. His Egyptian rite, developed in conjunction with female adoption lodges, included magical invocations and talismanic elements, which illustrates how Freemasonry could serve as both a vessel and a legitimating structure for magical practice. Further evidence of Masonic magic convergence can be found in the spiritual aims attributed to Freemasonry by esotericists in the 19th and 20th century. Eliphas Levi, Papieu, and later members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, many of whom were initiated Masons, explicitly identified Freemasonry as a carrier of ancient esoteric wisdom and a platform for magical work. The transmutation of the self, central to both magical and Masonic theory, was seen not as a metaphor but as an actual inner alchemical process, catalyzed through ritual and symbolic engagement. More recently, scholars such as William Moore have noted the psychological and archetypal dimensions of Masonic rituals, especially as expressed through architectural symbolism. Drawing on Jungian analysis, Moore argues that the temple space constructed by the Masonic Lodge serves as a ritual container for transformative psychological processes, mirroring the aims of magical and initiatory traditions more broadly. This view aligns with Carl Jung's own interest in Masonic symbolism, particularly the square and compass as archetypes of individuation and moral integration. Importantly, the magical dimension of Freemasonry has often been marginalized by mainstream Masonic authorities, partly in response to repeated waves of anti-Masonic polemic. Importantly, the magical dimension of Freemasonry has often been marginalized by mainstream Masonic authorities, partly in response to repeated waves of anti-Masonic polemic. During the 19th century, Catholic and secular critics alike accused Masons of practicing sorcery, Satanism, or political subversion, often invoking fantastical interpretations of ritual content. The infamous Taxil hoax of the 1890s exemplifies this dynamic, whereby invented confessions of Masonic diabolism circulated widely, fueling conspiracy theories and ecclesiastical condemnation. Ironically, these attacks have sometimes overshadowed genuine scholarly inquiry into the esoteric dimensions of Masonic practice. Nevertheless, it is undeniable that Freemasonry's symbolic architecture, ritual drama, and historical affiliations place it firmly within the broader stream of Western esotericism, even if many of its members disavow magical activity per se. Freemasonry may not be a magical system in the operative sense of spellcrafting or theurgy, but it remains deeply entangled with magical modes of knowing, acting, and becoming. Its rituals, legends, and symbols continue to operate as conduits for transformation of the self, of society, and in some interpretations of the word's hidden structures. So, to conclude, Freemasonry endures as a living tradition precisely because of its capacity to negotiate continuity and change, secrecy and disclosure, tradition and innovation. While much of the public discourse surrounding Freemasonry has focused on conspiracy theories or political intrigue, its deeper significance lies in the ritual transmission of moral, symbolic, and in many contexts, esoteric knowledge. Whether as a vehicle for personal transformation, a sociopolitical network, or a symbolic theater of initiation, Freemasonry resists reductive categorization. One of its most persistent features is its ritual adaptability. As Sneck demonstrates through his exhaustive study of the adoption rite, Masonic ritual evolves in response to shifts in cultural context, particularly with regard to gender, theology, and institutional legitimacy. In tracing the development of over 130 adoption rite rituals, Sneck reveals a tradition that is not only dynamic but also dialogical, that incorporates new symbols, modifies structures, and negotiates its relationship to male dominated Freemasonry with strategic precision. Likewise, William Moore's work on Masonic architecture underscores the material and spatial dimensions of Masonic practice, arguing that temples are not just meeting spaces but architectonic embodiments of Masonic cosmology. These buildings, often blending classical and modernist idioms, are ritual spaces that mediate between the profane and the sacred. As Moore notes, they function both as public affirmations of masculine virtue and private sanctuaries of fraternal transformation, which shows the layered nature of Masonic identity. This multivocality is particularly evident when Freemasonry intersects with local cultural systems. In the Hawaiian Kingdom, for instance, Freemasonry was adopted by the Ali'i royalty not as a colonial imposition, but as a mechanism of elite legitimization and international diplomacy. The rituals were adopted to Hawaiian cultural norms while maintaining their Masonic core, which reveals the flexibility of the system to serve divergent ends, esoteric, political, and diplomatic. Additionally, the spatial and geometric expressions of Masonic identity have deep implications for the study of religion and modernity. As demonstrated in Geographies of Freemasonry, the lodge is not only a symbolic space, but also a node in a broader urban and imperial geography. Lodges reflect and participate in the spatial logic of Enlightenment modernity, manifesting ideals of order, symmetry, and rationality while also engaging in aesthetic performances that often transcend those ideals. Finally, it is critical to underline that Freemasonry has never been a monolith. Its history is one of schism and synthesis, of inclusion and exclusion, of secrecy and revelation. As Berman illustrates in his account of the 1750s schism between the moderns and the ancients, internal conflict has often generated institutional and ritual innovation rather than simple fragmentation. Schisms have forced Freemasonry to define and refine itself, revealing how internal contestation can be a generative force in the evolution of esoteric traditions. Freemasonry thus operates as a liminal tradition, existing between religion and secularism, between politics and privacy, between public visibility and occultation. It engages the mythic past while embracing the symbolic capital of modernity. It claims universality while adapting to local national and gendered specificities. As such, it offers a compelling model for the study of contemporary Western esotericism, one that is ritualized, institutionalized, and global in scope, yet never fully reducible to any single identity or function. It provides a unique case study of how symbolic systems endure not by remaining fixed, but by their capacity to be reactivated, reinterpreted, and richly reinscribed across generations. This is it for today's video, and these are my references. So if you watched until this point, leave me a stone emoji for stonemasons, or a compass if you have a compass emoji. I know that their different keyboards have different emojis, so you can leave me a stone emoji or a compass emoji, or you can just type stone or compass if you really can't find them. But that way I will know that you have watched until this point, and I'm very proud of you because you're super committed to your learning, and you should also be very proud of yourself. So given that we are by the end, I hope that you liked this episode. I hope that I gave you a wide enough and broad enough overview of Freemasonry in all of its forms and shapes. And if you like my project of delivering this scholarly content on esotericism to you guys, I would really, really love it if you'd consider supporting me on Patreon, Ko-fi, PayPal, checking out my services at drangelapuka.com, super thanking me in the comments, checking out my merch. There are many, many ways you can support this work, and I really appreciate each and all of you for doing so. I have quite a few free members on my Patreon community. So if you're one of those, please join my paid membership, even at the lowest tier, because now I have quite a few. And it's like if all of them signed up, even at the lowest tier, it would be a massive help for my project. So please consider doing so. Any type of help really helps me and helps this project. So thank you for considering, and also sign up for my newsletter, which is free and on my website, and allows you to stay in touch with me regardless of capricious social media algorithms. And if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and activate the notification bell so that you will never miss a new upload from me or live stream or anything that is going on this YouTube channel. And yeah, share my videos around, this one and any that you love, to anyone who might be interested. Just spam my videos around. That's a free way to help me out, so please do so. And leave me a comment, because I want to know what you thought about this episode and what are your thoughts about Freemasonry. Are you a Freemason yourself? Do you have any doubts about Freemasonry? So yeah, let me know anything that you know and all of your experiences. I read all of your comments. I can't reply to them all, but I do read them all. So thank you all so much for being here, and I hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.